Hey everyone. In a call recently with someone, we were talking about self-blame, and I suggested that self-blame is a ego trip, and that didn't go down well. And because it sounds very confronting, doesn't it? When we're feeling really low and and there's all these thoughts about, we're a failure, people hate us, we're messing things up, we can't do what we should be doing. It looks like that is the opposite of an ego trip, doesn't it? It really looks like it's sort of self denial, really. Like it looks like we're not in any way building up our idea of self. And so we take it personally when someone says something like that, because in that moment, everything is personal. And this is why it is an ego trip. And it's not in any way an insult. It's not in any way a disparaging of the mind. It's just an illumination of what the mind is doing. Because when when the mind is full of thoughts and beliefs about how awful we are, all the thoughts and beliefs are about the self. The entire focus is in on the self. So thoughts and beliefs and attention and focus in that moment is entirely wrapped up in the identity. And so that it's therefore an enormous, how should we say this? An enormous, in a way, celebration of myself as a separate being. So me as a separate identity, I'm like this and this and this and this. I'm different from all of you. Um, I'm isolated. I'm on my own. No one understands me. I can't do what other people do. And that is a can't be anything other than an ego magnification, really, because the whole thing is about the self. Everything in that moment is about me. And because everything in this moment is about me, all all the senses really are turned in towards the identity. And the only way any sort of external reality appears is through the thick lens of more evidence to support my isolation and my insecurity. So it's not personal, this, because there is no one doing it. But the mind takes offense at it because it's only personal. The mind only sees it as personal. It has to be personal. But it's not. It's in the moments when we can have a bit of perspective on that, what we can see is that momentary self-obsession happening, self-absorption, a complete inner closed circuit, really, look at the self. And reality either doesn't figure or is only evidence of why everything that's being thought in that moment is correct. And I say this not to annoy people or be confrontational, but because it's freedom. when it starts to become clear that however real, however true, however accurate it looks, that moment of self-obsession about my failings, my insecurity, my comparison to everyone else, it's a moment of ecstasy in a way for the identity. Sounds ironic, doesn't it? But it's ecstatic in its separation. It has such an identity. The ego is so separate and distinct and discrete and defined in that moment. It's like it's like ecstasy, bliss for it. This is what I am. I know what I am. I exist, and I'm this. So the identity is just like having a field day, really, even though the suffering in it is intense. And this is why it's so hard to see, because we're suffering so much in it, and then in comes these words, and it just seems to be adding more suffering to it. But if we really hear the words that say, in that moment, that's all that can be perceived. The mind is just got itself in a loop, a vicious circle loop of isolation and separation and definition and comparison and denigration, and that's all that's happening. No one is doing it. It's not that there's a self making that happen. It's not that there's a self that could control it. It's that the self exists in that loop. It's the loop that makes the self exist. So cool, this. So mad, but we can see it, can't we? I exist as a separate identity in that loop of self-denigration. And so in terms of my identity, it's finding something stable. Ironically, it's finding security in that. So no wonder the loop keeps going round and round. But freedom always is to feel the physical effect of that mental separation, because it's tension and it's contraction and it's a ill at easeness in the body, which is telling us the mind is going AWOL right now. The mind is doing a thing. The mind's in a loop. It's stuck like a record. It's stuck, and it needs that perspective to see, oh yeah, that's all that's happening. That's all that's happening. Nothing else. Just a ego trip of self-denigration, self-limitation. That's all it is. It has no truth in it. And we know this because it's not always like that. There are moments when that's not happening, when it doesn't even figure, and when there's not really any much idea of self, and there's just washing up or work or walking or whatever. And then there it is, this loop. And like, it sort of makes sense in terms of neurology, doesn't it? Like these neurons just like firing, and the more they fire, the more easily they fire the next time, and the synapses and connections is just like bridges being built. So it makes sense that this sort of loop, samsara is called in Sanskrit, it's just like this sort of furrow being built in the brain, that these thoughts just pass along so easily. But attention on them, perspective on them, presence to them, and the signal from the body is continually saying, no, it's just momentary madness, really. Nothing true in there. It might, yeah, I mean, it's deeply attractive for the mind to go into that loop because it's trying to find ourselves, trying to fix our identity, and it can't. Yeah. So it's an ego trip. Even if there's immense suffering in it, it's still an activity of selfing that has no bearing in reality and removes, in fact, removes all attention away from reality. And that's not a criticism. It's a description of what's going on. Nothing personal in it whatsoever. No self controlling it. The self exists in those thoughts. Yeah, cool, hey? Thank you. Bye.